Okay, so we were talking previously about supernatural encounters, spiritual encounters. People, whenever they see ghosts and when they talk about witches and they talk about aliens and they talk about all this stuff. I know, you know what we say. No, but also we talked about how angels, I know, it's terrible. But we also talked about how humans are spiritual beings, how we have body, soul, and spirit, how we are here in body, but we are not necessarily, hello, good morning. We are not necessarily remaining in our body, particularly when we die. We go to be with God. And then at the rapture, we rejoin our bodies because God will take the bodies of those dead and the bodies of those still living, transform us in the air. So once we talked about all that, we kind of left off with this idea is why is there so much fascination with the spiritual world? Why is it that you can give people a video, a documentary, say, on the wildlife, right? You go see a documentary on, the Discovery Channel about lions, but then all of a sudden, whenever there's a documentary on ghost hunting or alien encounters or whatever it may be, everyone's fascinated. Even though there's a lot of fascinating things in the physical world, we're all kind of drawn to these spiritual things, right? Humankind, human spirituality, and the unseen spiritual world, right? We know for a fact that this exists. We know for a fact that there is something beyond this life. Now, as Christians, we know it because God tells us, right? He tells us He created us, and He tells us there's something after death. But all people across all different religions, all throughout history, they've believed in an unseen spiritual world. They believed in gods they can't see. They believed in encounters. They've been scared of the dead. Well, if we are now alive and will one day be dead, can we communicate with those who have already died? That's the other conversation that keeps coming up. Can I talk to my loved one who's passed on or my ancestor or whatever? So Adam and Eve, first spiritual communication, who'd they talk with? Before the snake. Somebody told him to be fruitful and multiply, right? God spoke to him, right? And of course, then they talked to Satan. And then what's the next encounter they had? What's the next spiritual being they saw? Anyone remember? Angels guarding it with a flaming sword of fire, right? So there was some pretty amazing spiritual encounters for Adam and Eve. And then, of course,
God they talked to, or was it an angel that they talked to of God? Like, or was it Jesus? I mean,
it was Jesus, whenever he would walk on earth, because again, no man has seen God. Good point. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But the idea is that even with their kid, even Cain, who is talked about very negatively, right, as an evil, as a son of the devil, right? Did God encounter him? Did God speak with him? He sure did. He actually came to plead with him, don't do the wrong thing. Don't follow sin. Instead, do what's right. And of course, he chose not to, and it was a very bad interaction with him and Abel. But all throughout history, we have spiritual interacting with the physical. Do you guys remember what that evidence was before the flood? What was that thing that happened? What was those creatures that were created from the sons of God coming to the daughters of men? The Nephilim, right? The giants, depending on what version you're reading. And do you remember what happened to a man that was suddenly raptured from this earth? Who was the first guy raptured? What was his name? Enoch, right? And he was warned about the coming judgment. How do we know he was warned about the coming judgment? Well, number one, he's given prophecies that are quoted in the New Testament. So Enoch was a prophet of God. And do you remember what Enoch named his son? Methuselah. And what's Methuselah mean? It means his death brings it. His death brings what? Well, guess what happened the year that Methuselah died? The flood. So he was given a prophecy that your boy, when his life ends, judgment's coming. So he actually knew all about it. And so by the time we reach that generation that sees the flood, we see there's all kinds of spiritual interactions with the physical, right? And again, that's the Nephilim. And that comes, I'll just read a couple verses from Genesis 6. It says in verse 1, and it came to pass when men, that means the sons of Adam, began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, so the daughters of the men, that the sons of God, this is the sons of God, the sons of Yahweh, they saw the daughters of men that they were fair. and the daughters of men is the daughters of Adam. So this is clearly something that's not a child of, this is the children of men, and the not children of men are interacting. He says, they took wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. You want to guess what happened within 120 years? The flood came. And then he actually continues the thought in verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So supernaturally powerful beings were created from this hybrid of the sons of God and the daughters of men. And we know that Jesus actually talks about how angels are not meant to reproduce, right? He actually talks about it in Mark 12:25 when they're talking about human marriage in heaven. He says, when they shall rise from the dead, speaking of humans, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven.
They were just supposed to watch.
What's that?
They were just supposed to watch.
They're supposed to watch, and we're given tasks to interact. Angels, according to the New Testament, are their purpose was to serve and to work, deliver for God messages, because the word angel just means messenger, but also talks about serving those who will inherit eternal life. God created the angels to interact with us, and we see that throughout Scripture, but to do so in a positive way. But unfortunately, it seems to be from the book of Revelation, a third of the angels, they rebelled with Satan, and obviously they're not fulfilling their task. They're doing quite the opposite. They're trying to prevent us from hearing God's word and from turning to God and allowing God to interact with us. They're trying to block that by our own wickedness and brokenness.
Wasn't necessarily following Satan. I mean, going anything against God is following Satan, but that they just were so, what's the word I'm looking for? In love with some of the human women, that they broke their thing. It was just supposed to be.
They were just their great attraction for
It
that.
was out of the book of Enoch when I was seeing a little bit of that.
So don't forget, the book of Enoch was not written by Enoch. Okay, the book. A lot of people. That's a
and I'm just
common source of confusion. But
that's why I brought that up.
Yes,
this is the Enoch that it was from that I saw it. But I mean, then again, I've always wondered how in the world, when you make just a Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, then you get Seth. Okay, I know they have daughters, and never talked about their daughters. They must not.
It does talk about their daughters. They mention they do mention the daughters, by the way. It is in the Bible.
It is. Okay, well, I mean, if you look at the family we have down southern West Virginia and how they're on YouTube. And,
how do your genetics not get messed up?
How is the whole thing not? There has to be some other group or something that's.
So that's not completely accurate. I'll just kind of a side note, but it's worth talking about. So when Adam and Eve had Cain, he's her firstborn son. And after that, between him and Abel, we have no idea how many daughters they had, okay? We just know their second-born son is Abel. So we have Cain and Abel and possibly dozens of daughters. We don't know. Then we have Cain and Abel growing to adulthood. And Adam and Eve could have had many sons and daughters between them and by the time they grew in adulthood. People lived to 900 to 1,000 years back then, right? So that means that Cain and Abel probably lived in a community of at least dozens, if not hundreds of people, okay? Because all of their brothers and sisters, who also end up marrying and they start having their children, they all have dozens of kids. So now it's not just me, it's a family, again, of hundreds and who knows how many.
It's all brothers and sisters.
They're all brothers and sisters, but they're genetically perfect. Why is it bad now, aside from the disgusting idea of it, why is it bad to marry your brother? Why is it bad to marry your sister? Why is it bad to marry your cousin? Because within about 3 generations, right, the genetic mutation, so if my dad had a genetic mutation, that was going to lead, let's say, to Down syndrome. And if I got that mutation, even though I don't have Down syndrome, and my sister got that mutation and we had a child, that child is possibly going to get both of the genes that make Down syndrome, and the kid would get Down syndrome. But what if there were zero mutations? What if Adam and Eve were made by the hand of God? And what if they had perfect DNA? And what if all the radiation of the sun and all the years of degradation didn't happen? That means that they would all be genetically perfect. So while the idea is disgusting, there could be no mutations. The whole reason you don't marry your sibling is because you share the same mutations. There were zero mutations back then. So you wouldn't have genetic problems, right? So you would have, yes, they would be, but by the time Abel dies, there are probably hundreds and 3 to 4 generations of people already living on the earth. And once Abel dies, Adam and Eve have another son, not their third-born son, just the next son after Abel. And she believes this new son is meant to replace Abel. That's why she calls him appointed. He's appointed in place of Abel, right? So by the time Cain is an adult and Abel is dead, Abel may have had kids. We don't know, but we don't think he did, because otherwise you would think his kid would be the one in place of him. So, but Seth, by the time he grows up, there are generations of humans. And you are now far enough apart that even by today's standards, not suggesting you should marry your second cousin, but genetically it's considered safe.
My third.
Yeah. So it's considered safe to marry beyond your second or third cousin. There's no legal law against it. And even in America, there's some places that anything beyond a first cousin is considered legal. Do I recommend it? No, I do not. But the point is, that's the idea. So there wouldn't be any genetic problem, and there wouldn't be a logistic problem, because there would be hundreds, and again, by the time Seth's around, possibly thousands, because every one of these couples are not just producing 2 or 3 kids like we do today. They're producing sons and daughters in volumes. The population of the earth was probably quite large by the time you hit the flood. Does that make sense? And now, to go. And he built a city with his family. Right. He built a city with his family when he just went with him and his wife. Right.
His wife was his sister.
His wife was his sister. Absolutely. Well, it's not like you had an option. You had 0 options.
Maybe, I mean, that could be the whole thing. Maybe
it's not. It could be
plastics. Zero.
Well, zero, Adam and Eve were the first people. Even if they had all the environment.
It was practical.
Well, it's practical, but what were you saying? Sorry.
I was just thinking it was probably very competitive back then, because if you only had like 4 or 5 guys to go after, and maybe you and your sister liked that one guy, you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe it was kind of competitive.
Well, I mean, it was competitive. There were only so many options. And that's actually way getting off. We're going down this rabbit trail here, which is fine. This is one of the reasons the Old Testament will allow multiple wives. Now, it doesn't allow it because it's a good idea, because everyone that we look at that had multiple wives, we have like Jacob, we have David, we had Solomon, it never turned out in their favor. It was always a problem. But the idea was, because the men go to war, there was always a scarcity of men, because men tended to die, for whatever reason. And whenever, if somebody died, you wanted to carry on the legacy of the person that died. So it would be the responsibility of those, like the prisoners of war, the women, the prisoners of war, they could marry the people who were now their slave masters, but they would become integrated into the society. They weren't treated as slaves, but were actually married to their masters and so forth. Same thing with whenever your own people, if my brother died and he didn't have any kids, like no sons to carry on his name, it would be my responsibility, even if I'm married, to take his wife as my second wife in order to provide a child for my brother, so that it continues down his line. It was a way to protect women, not a way to give men what they wanted. Now, other cultures, they did it as a way to exploit women. But in this particular culture, it was designed as a way to protect women, so they wouldn't be left without a protector and without a line, without kids, because the value of a woman was highly linked back then to producing children and carrying on the family name. That's why you see the struggle with women who couldn't bear children. It was this constant, like, big deal to them, and they would beg for having a kid. And that's where you see that with many women in the Bible. But to go back to your original question, which was, what about these fallen angels? What made them drawn to the women? It was rebellion against God and hatred of women. And how do we know that? Or not hatred of women, hatred of humans. We know that because there are subtle references in the letters of Peter and in Jude, okay, who actually reference these fallen angels and say how they're kept in chains of darkness right? Until judgment day. They're actually already in a pre-judgment judgment because of what they did being so wicked. And we see that God is not, he has forbidden that for them because angels don't have, as you would think, a gender. They're referred to as he, but gender has to do with sexual reproduction.
Yeah.
And they weren't designed for that. But because they could take human form, right, they were able to do a lot of these things. Now, again, that doesn't mean God is okay with it. But what did the humans do whenever this happened? Did they beg God? Did they seek after God? Did they search for God? No. People didn't begin to call on the name of the Lord till well after. And even when they did, that doesn't mean they were seeking God. Who gets killed in the flood? It's not just the Nephilim. It's everybody, including Noah's brothers, Noah's sisters, and the daughters-in-law, their whole family. All the sons of Seth and the other ones, none of them searched after God. So it's not like they were like, oh my gosh, God, look at these evil beings. We need your help. They didn't care. They were out there fine with it. And that's the problem. The people had become so corrupted, no one was looking after God. Only one man was found righteous, and that was Noah. And by proxy, his wife and his 3 sons, who we don't even know if they were good guys, but after the flood, they did some sketchy stuff. But the point is, they were saved by the righteousness of their father and God willing to protect them all through the ark and so on. Does that kind of answer the question about why they rebel? Okay.
We were talking about scary things, so I brought up women.
What's that?
They were probably 16 years old.
Oh, the ones of the sons, you mean? Oh, exactly. All right. So those spiritual beings way back then during the flood, they took human form and they disobeyed God's commands. Okay. Now, these hybrid beings, these hybrid children of them, they were very large in stature. Again, we use the word giants, but some versions of the Bible use the word Nephilim based on it because it's a word that we don't really have a definition of. All right. And remember, whenever we talked a little bit about aliens, we talked about one of the common themes of alien abductions has to do with reproduction, right? They implanted something in me. They probed me. They did this. They did that. That's one of the common themes. That's not a new idea. And if you look back in ancient cultures, what did the people worship? They worshiped beings from other planets, or the planet itself was a god. And when something came down and they thought it was a god, what did they do? They gave it their women. They gave it, and they were okay with whatever that person or being wanted to do. You know, if you ever seen the ancient cultures that would, this was more of a movie thing than it was very common in life, but when they would take a virgin to the top of a volcano and sacrifice her, or they would take their children and they would sacrifice them on pits and so forth, this was all for what? To please these false gods who wanted to see death and sexual sin. That's what they were going for, right? So the ancient people, they understood that celestial beings like planets and like the moon and so forth, they could affect the earth in some way, some form. So they assumed they were beings of like personal nature, not just physical beings, or not just natural occurrences, we could say. But like the tides on the earth, what's that caused by? The moon and the spin of the earth, right? You can, but the fact is, you know, we can measure gravity. Do you ever realize that just because science has measured something and can test it and explain it maybe in some degree, that doesn't make it even a little bit less amazing? That doesn't even make it a little bit less of a miracle? You think about that. Gravity, a force that just holds you to something because it's big, because it's how far it is from you. That's a pretty incredible thing, right? But anyway, these ancient civilizations, they may not have been able to understand physics, but they could see the effects of heavenly or spiritual beings on the earth, on the physical bodies. And so what did people do? These ancient peoples, they would say, oh, well, I can communicate with these spiritual beings. And here's what the moon said. If you don't do what I want, he's going to cause a huge wave to destroy your city, or he'll not let you catch any fish, and so on and so forth. And that's probably one of the reasons you see these daughters being given away, where these fallen angels were willing to take them or wanted to take them. These men didn't try to stop them. They just let it happen. I would go off on a tangent here about what we allow our daughters to do and what we allow things to happen spiritually in this earth, but we're going to leave that for another time. All right. So these hybrid creatures in the time of Noah had immense power. And guess what we hear in every culture today? What do we hear in every culture? Demigods, right? There were half God, half man beings. And of course, where do you think that comes from? Same thing from the Bible, where it talks about these Nephilim, these half angel, half human beings that were supernaturally strong. You think about Hercules, son of Zeus, but son of a human woman. I can't remember her name. So anyway, as we progressed as a society, we say, oh, we don't believe like those ancient people and all these gods. They don't even believe in the God of the Bible. But what do we believe? Oh, we believe in ghosts. We believe in aliens. We believe in other supernatural beings. We've just replaced the term. Instead of calling them ancient gods, what have we called them? Aliens. What have we called them? Ghosts. What do we call them? Witches. All these different things, okay? So this, of course, leads to that view we had talked about where people say, well, maybe there's life on other planets and all this other stuff. But we know the truth from the Bible. We know why God created life, human life, animal life, all life across the cosmos. We know why he created the sun, moon, and stars, and he created them after the earth, not before. Okay? So from God's perspective, the earth is the center of God's attention. I'm not arguing that the earth is the center of our solar system, but I am saying that the earth is the center of God's attention, and the beings at the center of God's attention are humans. That's it. All of creation is bound to the fate of mankind. Creation cannot be redeemed if a man is not the one to redeem it. Okay, remember the scroll in the book of Revelation? If you're not familiar with it, you should look it up. But in the book of Revelation, there's a scroll, and it's written on the inside and out. And they said, who can open this scroll? And I looked for a man in heaven above, below, on the earth, or below the earth. And I couldn't find a man that could open it until they saw the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Jesus, right? The Lamb as he had been slain. So because he could redeem it, all of creation could be redeemed. This is from Romans 8:2. It says, for we know that the whole creation, that means all the planets, all the universe, groans and travails in pain together until now. All of creation is falling apart. All of creation needs redeemed. It's waiting for the redemption of Jesus Christ, for him to open the seals on the scroll. Okay? So Jesus, of course, as we...
Which is interesting because as John's having this vision, which means there's no angels, no other creatures, no
being
that is worthy to open those scroll.
Right.
Open that scroll, open those seals.
And he calls him a lion. He looks like a lamb, but it turns out he's a man, right? So,
Even angels couldn't open it.
yes, angels, even Michael with all his power has no authority to open that scroll, right? So he became a man. Jesus became a man to die for our sins and to redeem mankind. And by doing so, he can redeem all of creation. So when he returns to this earth as king, all creation, now again, in the future, the sun, moon, the stars, everything we see today, even this earth, it all passes away. The heavens are gone and everything is remade. It's remade in the perfect form it should have been made.
Flat plane with a front.
Exactly. That might, we'll see. We'll yet see.
Thank you for that reaction.
So in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10,
Just saying.
just saying. In 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10, it says, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, and the earth also and all the works that are therein shall be burned up. So the heavens, that's outer space, that's everywhere we see. And the earth, it's all going away. It's going to be fixed. It's going to be redeemed. So again, there's spiritual things happening and will happen. And then in Revelation 21 verse 1 says, and I saw in a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. So this reveals something. Again, I know it seems a little bit off topic, but this is actually relevant. This reveals the fate of the universe, including all other planets, is related to the earth and the redemption of mankind. Do you follow that? This is why it's important to have this understanding when we see these supernatural events, these aliens, these spiritual things, right? Do you remember what was the first woman's name before, when she was still in the garden? What was her name? Her name was Adam, but of the Adam species, the Adam being, there was man, there was Adam, and then what was the lady's name? It wasn't Eve. That's right. It wasn't Eve. Didn't start as Eve. Woman. Yes, woman. Because she came out of man, right? So the word just means from man, right? So woman was her name. But what name, of course, was the way we all know her, is what Adam named her once they got kicked out of the garden. That's when she was called Eve, okay? So in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, it says, and Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Wait a minute. Eve was considered the mother of all living. Now, if she's the mother of all living, you have some explaining to do. What about horses? Is she the mother of all horses? No. Are horses alive? Yes. So what are we talking about? This is a specific type of living we are talking about here. This isn't just physical life, or otherwise she'd be the mother of all the animals, but she is not. She's the mother only of humanity. And we're not discussing just spiritual life, because guess what? Angels are all alive. Is Eve the mother of all angels? Of course not. So if we have this woman who's the mother of all living, we have to talk about a very specific being that both has a physical life and a spiritual life. That's unique to humans. Angels are spirits, animals are physical. We are both physical and eternal. We have a physical body and we have a spiritual body, right? That's what we are. So Eve is the mother of all who have that, right? So God can create life on any planet he wants, but whatever planet you think they're happening on, if they're not human from this earth, and they didn't come from Eve, right? They are not living in the sense of having a physical body and an eternal spirit, okay? Because all of creation, as I mentioned before, it's all a part of humanity's story. We aren't one planet created from the universe. We are a universe created from one planet. It all comes from God creating everything. So God has already told us the beginning, the current state, and the future destiny of this universe, and it does not involve interaction with extraterrestrial alien beings. It does involve interaction with supernatural non-human beings, which includes angels and fallen angels, right? So, no Klingons, I'm sorry, no Klingons. So the interactions that a lot of people claim are extraterrestrial are spiritual in nature. And you really should go back and watch those videos that we did from our study a few weeks ago if you want to talk more about it. But in the end times, we're going to see the whole world is going to unite under a king. That king is called the Antichrist, right? He's the beast from the sea, if you look at it in the book of Revelation. And he is going to convince the world to put aside all their disagreements, all of their fights, and to unite against a new threat. And he's going to convince the world that that new threat is bad. But the problem is that new threat is Jesus Christ. He gets the whole world to try to unite against God and against anyone who serves God. He convinces the whole world. So the Bible doesn't tell us specifics of how he does it, but one part of his rise to power is the rapture of the church. So in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, when the Thessalonians are all upset, like, did we miss the rapture? He says, no, you can't have missed the rapture because there's no Antichrist yet. He says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, speaking of the day of the Lord, the rapture, shall not come, except there come a falling away first. Something has to happen where the church suddenly falls away. It's gone. And that man of sin be revealed. That Antichrist has to come on the scene, the son of perdition. So we have not yet seen this great falling away. We're certainly in a lukewarm church today where people aren't taking God seriously, but we haven't seen a sudden falling away and the revealing of this man of sin. So he says, you haven't missed it. Here's why. Okay. So this man of sin, this Antichrist, he's going to convince the people using supernatural events to convince the world, unite under the Antichrist. And his servants also perform supernatural abilities and miracles to convince the world that, hey, we are telling you the truth, but they're lying. So in Revelation chapter 16, and just imagine this for a moment. Revelation chapter 16, verse 13. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, that's Satan, and out of the mouth of the beast, that's the Antichrist, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. The false prophet's the what seems to be a Jewish man that's trying to convince the world of the Antichrist power. So frogs come out of their mouth. They're unclean spirits. They're like frogs, for they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So just notice that real quick. The force of demonic influence with human armies, they join together. There is a unholy alliance between the world leaders of humanity and demonic beings proceeding out of the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan, and they join together to make this alliance against God. Isn't that kind of strange? But he convinces the world because they perform miracles, right? But of course, does all their power matter whenever Jesus comes to earth? Not for a second, right? Jesus comes by, and what happens to his outfit? Does anyone remember? It's covered in blood, and it's not his own blood this time. It's because he slaughters his enemies. Not a very comfortable thought, but it does remind you who you're dealing with, right? So what's fascinating about all this, are people going to listen to frogs, by the way? Do you think if a frog jumped up and said, "Kiss me, I'll become a prince," would you believe it? First of all, I'd be amazed that it talked, right?
But your parents.
But more specifically, people are not going to listen to frogs, but they are going to listen to advisors or some kind of being, again, that gives you some sort of spiritual guidance. If there was, extraterrestrial, some communication, we got communication from this outworldly being about what we need to do. If you can show that communication, you'll probably be able to convince world leaders. And you think I'm joking, but we showed a video before of how world leaders are talking about extraterrestrial beings visiting us and presidents believing in aliens and so forth and so on. And this isn't just America. These are Russian leaders, American leaders, Chinese leaders, European leaders across Europe that believe in extraterrestrials already, right? So these are going to give this guidance and the people are going to believe them. So they're going to submit their power to the Antichrist and he's going to run the world, right? The book of Daniel even suggests this. Back in Daniel chapter 2, verse 42 and 43, it says, talking about the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about. He talked about, it had the head of gold and then all the way down to the feet of iron. And then the feet and the toes were made of iron mixed with clay. He said, as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so shall the kingdom be partly strong and partly broken. So we have a mixed kingdom that's the last kingdom before Jesus returns. He says, and whereas you saw iron mixed with clay, they, listen to these words, they shall mingle themselves with the children of men. Okay, that's interesting, but they shall not cleave one to another because iron is not mixed with clay. So if I said something is going to mix itself with humanity, what does that argue the something is? Something that's not humanity. Wouldn't that seem the right interpretation there? So something will unite with humanity, and we already saw that the world leaders are going to be influenced by these spiritual beings to unite against God, but they don't mix. It's an unholy alliance. It doesn't work. It doesn't mix, and they ultimately get destroyed. But this power, these frog-like demonic creatures, it comes from Satan. And what does this tell you? That demonic influences are all over the world. When you talk about governments of the world, even the governments we like, even the ones we're in favor of, right? There is spiritual influence there. Doesn't mean God doesn't use world leaders to do his will. It's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying there's not good, godly leaders, but the underworkings of world governments are under the influence of spiritual guides, and a lot of times they are not good ones. That's why sometimes you'll see, how can that person do that? Look how evil they're doing. Look how these, we think about the Hitlers of the world and, North Korea's and every other place, but also even in countries that are westernized, sometimes you see crazy things. How are they thinking like this? Well, because there are spiritual influences here, right? But the frogs, are they the only demonic army we see in the book of Revelation? No. I call them frogs, but they're demonic beings that looked like frogs, right? So in Revelation chapter 9, verse 7, talks about this army of locusts. says the shapes of the locusts, John's trying to describe them for us, they're like horses prepared to battle. And on their heads were like crowns of gold. Their faces were like the faces of men, and their hair was like the hair of women. And their teeth were as teeth of lions, and they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. And the power was to hurt men 5 months. Well, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Now, some people say, well, maybe these are military vehicles, and maybe they are. Or maybe they're otherworldly or supposedly otherworldly beings that show up on the scene to convince the world that, hey, look, there is supernatural things going on. What about this other army? Revelation 9, verse 16. The number of the army of the horsemen were 200 million, 200,000 thousands. Huge army. And I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. So all of these facts. So why are we rehashing all this prophetic stuff? Tells you one thing. We, as Christians, ought not to be surprised as the days progress, as things progress towards the end times, that you're going to see more supernatural events, more alien encounters, more spiritual encounters, more appearances of ghosts, more manifestations as the spiritual world, even though it's always been active, becomes more apparent. It begins to unite with mankind and control the world leaders. This is expected, right? So when you see the significant portion of the world's population disappear in the rapture, when they go missing, you need a common enemy to unite the world, right? And of course, what are you going to say? Oh, there's some advanced weapon. Oh, it's some advanced being. We need to unite against it. Whatever argument they're going to make, I don't know. But there's going to be something that draws the whole world to put aside all the old hatreds and join together. And attributing them to extraterrestrials or spiritual things, that shouldn't surprise us. And it shouldn't allow anyone to deceive us whenever you see these events. There's right now an asteroid heading this way, and the James Webb Telescope, they're like, oh my gosh, look, on the front of the asteroid, it looks like a statue is there. And it's a pretty interesting picture, right? A statue of something holding something up that shouldn't be there. They're like, this is a spacecraft. And then they measured its speed, and it's going faster than the speed of light, defying everything we know about physics. We already talked about how things outside of our dimension would defy physics. But the idea is, why is it that even if they saw this and they don't know it, again, when you look at an item that's light years away, why would I cause alarm today? Why would I bring it up today to the whole world population that this spacecraft is coming? That won't be here, even if they're right, for thousands and millions of years. You're setting the stage. You're changing people's thinking. You're making them willing slowly to accept. Why are all the world governments all of a sudden releasing all their UFO data? Why is every evening you'll find alien documentaries? Why is this becoming so abundantly common all of a sudden?
So ICE can get rid of those aliens.
Right. Wrong kind of aliens, but right point. But the whole idea, again, you should expect it. It shouldn't shake your faith, not even a little bit, whenever you see all these alien things. Did you have something good?
It does create a subject
To discuss.
to discuss
Amen.
that everybody can be unified in, rather than the same 2 or 3 different political parties
Right.
constantly clash.
Constantly arguing, right? They can say, we're all going to work and look at this, right? And you're right, but do you see what you just said is actually amplifying my point? Because it's something that brings both sides together, right? They both unify around this message. And that's exactly the point. They will unify not just the Republicans and the Democrats, but it'll unify the North Koreans and the South Koreans. It'll unify the Chinese and the Japanese. It'll unify the Ukrainians and the Russians, because it's a bigger threat. It's not just us fighting over, taxation or whatever. It's fighting over something much bigger. It will unify the world. So it's good, but even as Christians, it should also let us know that when people bring up this stuff, right? What about this alien? What about this? And, I actually believe that all these sightings some of them can be legitimate. I believe people are encountering this. I just believe it's actually extra dimensional from the spiritual world, not extraplanetary, and it does give us opportunities to talk. Very good point.
I
So,
think Reagan hit that point also. He gave a speech about the aliens coming, about unifying the world. But everything out there, alien abductions, alien everything, is all propaganda. It's all deception. The Bible says that Satan was cast down to the earth who goes about deceiving the whole world. Now, I think the interest in aliens is also that when Christ comes, he's coming with 144,000 humans. That's true. He's also coming with a whole bunch of aliens called angels. He's got a vast army of angels coming. So when these people are coming, we are not going to embrace the coming of the Messiah. We're going to embrace we're being invaded by aliens, and we're going to get the world together to fight against them.
that's how the Antichrist is going to spin it. Absolutely. That could be how he spins it, right?
Deception that we are being
Primed for.
correct.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. You are being primed, and all of us are. And again, we talked about statistics. 2 out of every 3 people are convinced in extraterrestrial life. So if 2 out of every, is not much further to go that you can deceive the majority of the world. Now, we went through all of that. We got about 8 minutes left. So let's just touch on some of the biblical interactions of the physical world and the spiritual world. And I'm going to read just a couple passages here. So Jesus, when he's talking about the story of Lazarus, remember Lazarus who died? He was the poor man, and the rich man died shortly thereafter. And there's an indication that the spiritual world wants to interact with the physical world. Now, some people say this was an actual story Jesus was telling. Some people believe it's a parable. Can't tell you for sure. I tend to believe Lazarus was a real person, and I believe this is actually a thing that happened. But again, let's just read what it says. It says, Luke 16, verse 27 says, Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, talking to Abraham, that thou wouldst send Lazarus. The rich man is begging Abraham, send Lazarus back from the dead. Send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come to this place of torment. What is he asking for? Send back Lazarus from the dead as a ghost or as a resurrected body or something to tell my brothers to believe in God, to not live the way I lived, to turn from their wicked ways, because I don't want them to come here. So Abraham said unto him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. He said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And Abraham said, No, they won't. And then shortly thereafter, we have another guy named Lazarus that comes back from the dead, and they want to kill him. And shortly thereafter, we have Jesus Christ coming back from the dead, and they still refuse. So Abraham was right, but the point being that this man, the spiritual world in hell, wants to communicate with the physical world. That should not surprise you, because again, we think about people who died, people who rejected Jesus Christ. If your loved one died and went to heaven, guess what they want for you? They want you to come to heaven too, because it's amazing. And if your loved one died and went to hell, guess what they want for you? They want you to go to heaven, because where they are is miserable. People are like, oh, well, I'm going to go hang out with all my friends. Your friends do not want you there. If they were really your friends, they do not want you there. They are desperate for you to go to heaven. So all the loved ones, that's what they want. But the disciples, now how about the disciples? Did they believe in the supernatural, in the spiritual interacting? Well, do you remember when Jesus was walking on water, what they thought? Mark 6:49, exactly. There was a ghost. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. These are, the Peters and all the different apostles, right? The Andrews, the Johns, the James. Okay, how about after the resurrection? Now they're, more mature, right? They've been with Jesus for several years, right? So then they see Jesus back to life. They were terrified and affrighted, but suppose they had seen a spirit. Luke 24:37. So they still were convinced they saw a ghost, because they did not understand what the spiritual world meant. And they didn't understand when Jesus came back, he was the first guy not to just be, You know, oh, he's dead. He was real sick. He just died. Let's raise him from the dead. Lazarus, you know, Jesus could raise him from the dead, but we know Jesus is dead. He was brutally ripped apart. He was put on the cross. There's no chance for him to be alive. And here he is. Here he is right in front of him, right? God also communicates that the spiritual world is not only real, but communication with the spiritual world is possible and it's forbidden. This is something God tells us, okay? It's possible and it's forbidden. He doesn't say it's dead humans that you're talking to, but there is communication with the spiritual world and it's forbidden. Because what does he forbid? He forbids fortune telling. He forbids astrology, trying to tell your future by the zodiac, by looking at your horoscope, right? He forbids witchcraft, using the devil's power to accomplish something. He forbids animal mind control, manipulation of animal minds. He forbids spiritual consultation, talking to spirit beings to help them guide your life. He forbids seances or communication with the dead. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10, says, "There shall not be found among you any one that makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire." So no human sacrifice. And on the same level of human sacrifice of your own children, he says, or that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. Those are all the things I mentioned beforehand in the common words. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. So all of the previous world, all the previous people that lived in the land of Israel used to practice all this stuff. And he said, I'm kicking them out. You better not do it. This is not okay. When I was a kid, everybody said, oh, magic's not real. Oh, witches aren't real. Oh, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. Does that sound like something that's not real that God's forbidding and giving the death sentence for? Or does it sound like something that's forbidden because it is real? Right? These are a few examples among many, right? We have in the Bible other spiritual events, right? We have prophetic dreams, which dreams tell the future, right? We have those many times recorded in Scripture, both some given to believers, right? And some given to non-believers. We have Daniel having visions and we have Nebuchadnezzar having visions. We have Joseph having visions. We have Pharaoh having visions. Okay. We have spiritual angels who are ready to kill humans. Angels holding a knife or a sword, ready to chop a human physical being in half, even though the guy can't see him, but his donkey can, right? We have warrior angels, armies of them defending God's prophets. They're right there, but only certain people can see them, not everyone. Are there spiritual interactions between the physical and the human? We have spiritual barriers. They're talking kind of loud. It's about time to wrap up, but there's spiritual barriers preventing evil spirits or evil beings from interacting with man. Do you remember Job? When Job had everything going well, Satan said, I want to attack him, but I can't. Why couldn't Satan attack him?
God placed a protective hedge around him.
God put a hedge around him. God puts barriers around his people and only allows what he chooses to allow. And there are barriers of demons from affecting you. But that's a spiritual event, and the demons want to affect you. They want to interact with you, and sometimes they'll do it through your children. Sometimes they'll do it through your friends. Sometimes they'll do it through other people in your life. But if God's protected you because you belong to Jesus, but you see this is a true thing, and I can give you all the references if anyone wants them. We have visions of heavenly realms. We have visions of the throne of God. We have demon possession, including Judas, right? We have visions of dry bones that come back to life, almost like reanimated corpses before they come completely to life. So we have some very specific examples that we're going to go through some of these examples, obviously not today. But again, in today's world, should we be surprised that people say they encountered the spiritual? I saw my grandma. Oh, my person, whoever it was, they recently died, and I felt their presence. Oh, I saw a ghost. Oh, I did that. This shouldn't surprise us. It's been happening throughout history. It's recorded in Scripture for us. The question is, what is it? And is it from God, or is it there to deceive us? And I think we all know the answer to that, but that's kind of the idea of where we're going to go. So a lot of people, they believe in having seen these spiritual events, seeing visions, whatever, and they're usually compelled to believe them because in some situations, both the encounter feels real, but it also might reveal something. And what does it reveal? It reveals something that's true. I was going to dance, man. What's up? But the whole point is, though, guys, sometimes people, they'll hear things that no one else should know. My grandma told me that in the floorboard, there's this treasure hidden, and it was there. The voices in my head told me I really need to get my brain scanned because there's a tumor, and it was there, right? What do we do in those situations? Because sometimes they are true. And so that's going to be something we're going to discuss next time. We'll pick up from where we left off. Who has some final thoughts, comments?
Well, real quick, talking about the rich man in the grave. Jesus, obviously during the time of the Messiah, there was numerous unclean spirits cast out. Matthew 12:43 says, when an unclean spirit is gone out of a man, it walketh through dry places or in arid places, seeking rest and findeth none. Well, this rich man was in a place where his spirit was dry and arid, and he was asking Abraham to send Lazarus over with that he may dip his finger in full water. Just sharing that with you, that that's why demons or unclean spirits go seek us, because they are in an arid place and they are looking for rest, and we provide it for them when we entertain them.
We give them a home. We give them a home whenever we now. And yeah, we're going to talk a whole lot more. I don't want to keep you guys late, but we'll pick up next time with this. But again, the spiritual world, though, the main key point of all of this is supernatural encounters should not be ignored and shouldn't be discounted whenever somebody tells you something. When your kid says, oh, I saw this, or there was something there. Maybe there was, but that doesn't mean it's a dead loved one. It doesn't mean it's a ghost haunting your house. But it can be an evil spiritual force, and the Bible's pretty clear on what we ought to do with those.
What were you saying about animals?
I don't remember. What was I saying about animals?
This is happening for the aspect of this.
Like trying to control animals or whatever?
About animals see the spiritual world more than the humans do.
Well, you don't know that they can see it more than the humans can.
Exactly, because he was saying, you shouldn't do the Ouija board, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, you
And
shouldn't.
manipulate animals like mine and
Manipulate
stuff.
animals type
Right.
thing. Okay, well, we're manipulating animals. The animals that.
Training and manipulating are two different things, but I know what you're saying.
Nature, or manipulate them by bringing them in and.
Yeah, like sniffing, they let you know when an earthquake's coming, someone's going to have a seizure, things like that. Using the sense of an animal and having them communicate to us is not the same as trying to manipulate an animal, say, to go and seek out somebody to kill them. There are evil uses of animals, some that have been used by militaries of the world, and some that have actually been used by witchcraft. Something where they actually use the animals, and we'll get into a little bit of that here next time. But like I said, I don't want to keep you guys too late. I know it's about time for the next service to start. Yeah, Cookie, she's on the list. I'm just joking. All right, we'll wrap up and then we'll say a prayer here, guys.